already. What's up, everybody? I'm John Mello, and I am the founder of PayHouse. We are a development agency that focuses specifically on Bubble applications. Today, what we're going to look at is the very unsexy, very underrated data tab. People start building in Bubble. They gravitate towards the design tab because it's fun to put elements on the page and be able to see the progress that you're making straight away. I understand the appeal, but if you're thinking about your app as a pyramid, the data that you build your user interface around forms the base of that pyramid. So it's very important to understand how to set up a data structure and in a way that supports your front end, what your users are going to see and interact with. So that's all we're going to look at today. All right, so the example that we're going to use is to wire up this mini food delivery app that I have created here. All right, so you can see that I've already put a bunch of elements on the front end here. We've got a repeating group, we've got two repeating groups, we've got a search box up here, and we've got some text elements and icons to program that we're going to program. You should be familiar how to set up a page layout like this, what you're seeing here. If you've watched either my video on parent-child relationships or the responsiveness video, I'll put links to both of those in the description. You should watch that first if you're not sure how to get to this point. And also, I'll put a link to this editor into the description of this video so that you can reference it and build something similar to it. So you're starting from this point. All right, so before we get to programming any workflows or anything like that, let's navigate over to the data tab and see what we got going on there. All right, so the first thing that you'll notice is that we have 5 different tabs here. All right, so we're in the data type tab. Okay, so one thing that you'll notice is that a user is built in. You can't delete this. The app data tab, you can see that we have a user table here, right? Before we've even done anything, we've got the user table built in. Bubble has pre-programmed this table for us to handle user information. Now, for those of you that haven't worked with a database before, one thing to keep in mind is it works very much like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you've worked with Excel before, you've technically worked with a database. Think of each of the data types that we're going to set up as a worksheet or the table. And the entire database will be the workbook in that analogy, right? So, but it's very similar, right? So you've got the column headings here, and below it are going to hold the rows of data that you're inputting. Bubble calls this a thing. All right, so let's add something straight away. Let's add 2 users to our user table here. All right, so we're going to go to new entry, and I'm going to add 2 emails, John J. Mello at payhouse.co, and I'll add apps at payhouse.co. We're going to do all this stuff manually first so that you can see, get comfortable with the idea of creating data in a database, and then we're going to see how to create that data via workflows or the front end way of creating this data. All right, so now we've got 2 users. Now, one thing that's unique to the user table while we're here is this run as feature. This is going to enable you to run the app in the preview mode as a specific user. And that's very helpful for debugging problems or specific use cases with the user is seeing something that others are not. All right, so take advantage of this. It's the same thing as hitting preview. You're just running as this particular person. All right, let's switch back over. Now that we've got some data in this user table, let's switch back over to the data types. All right, so we have these other built-in fields that, again, we can't delete these. The user needs to at least have an email. The last data was modified, the data was created, and then a slug. We'll slugs a little bit later. All right, so but if I want to add new fields, and think of a field as a column in your user table, right? Another column to describe the data type of a user. let's call this, let's do a name, right? Now, whenever you create a new field, you need to name the field, and you also need to specify which type of data this field or column is going to hold, right? And that's going to determine how Bubble treats that data, right? So if you're doing text, you're going to get all the options for working with text. If you set it to a number, it's going to give you multipliers, less than or equal to, things like that. So specifying the correct data type for the information that you're trying to hold is very important. Text. So here we're going to do text. All right. And then I'm going to hit create. All right, now we've got another name, another column in our user table called name. And if we go to app data, you'll see that the name column opens up here. Okay, and we can add more info the same way that we did the other one, the same way that we added the email. All right. So in this use case, let's start setting up our data model, right? So in this use case, I am building an app that, for those of you that are not familiar with Seamless, you may have a similar food delivery app in your area, Grubhub, Postmates, Uber Eats, whatever it is, it's all the same. And I'm going to basically create a mini version of that. The first thing that you want to think about is what type of information am I going to need to store and present to my users in order to take a food delivery order. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is restaurants. I need a table of restaurants that are going to hold the menu items that people are going to order from. So let's add a new data type here called restaurants. All right, and now think about it like this. What's some of the information that I would want to store about a restaurant? General to all restaurants. Probably the name of the restaurant, the phone number, an email, the website. All of those things can be set up as columns or fields in your database, or in your restaurants table. Okay, so again, we've got a few built-in fields here. Whenever you have a custom data type, that's what we just created, restaurants. It's going to have a creator. Right, so it's going to specify the creator, same thing like the user table here with the other three. Okay, so let's just create the name. Let's create a name for the restaurant, and again, that's going to be a type text. All right, so again, if we tab back over to app data, we now have a restaurants table, and we've got the name field here. So let's go ahead and add 3 restaurants to our restaurant table. New entry. I'm going to call this Frank's Frozen Yogurt. We'll call this Kate's Korean Barbecue. This is going to be Peter's Pizza. Okay, now we have 3 restaurants to work with. Now, let's start programming our front end. Let's jump right into the front end. We have some data. Let's switch over. All right, so if we go to restaurants now we have a search box. It's important that you use this, set this up as a search box, not an input, a search box. There's a difference. All right, so we're going to go to dynamic choices, and we're going to say modify a list of restaurants. And then the field to search on, this is automatically populated because it's the only text field, but the field to search on is going to be a name. All right, so now when I preview this, I can now type in Peter, and this will produce a single value from our restaurant table. I can't just put anything in here. I can't put OP because there's no valid value. It won't accept that. It's only looking up restaurants, right, with a value. So, and it's also case insensitive. So if I put in BBQ, it's going to pick up Kate's Korean Barbecue. But the important thing is that it's looking up to the restaurants table for a valid input. All right, so now that we have our restaurants in, we need some menu items. We need to have things on our menu here. All right, it's for people. Let's go back to our data tab and create a new data type, a new custom data type. And we're going to call this menu items. Create. All right, now same process. What do we need to describe about our menu items? We need what it's called. Maybe a picture of the menu item would be nice. The cost of it. So let's add those things, or let's add a few of those. We don't need all of them, at least for this demonstration. Let's call this the name, the menu item's name. Again, we're familiar with text. And let's do the cost. We're going to make that a number. So we're working with a different field type here. I'm going to talk about this field as a list momentarily. The next field that I'm going to add is probably the most important of all of them. This is the nature of a relational database. We're relating one table to another via a column or a field. Here, I'm using column and field interchangeably. So I'm going to call this field restaurant. And then I'm going to set the field type to be a restaurant, referring to the restaurant table. Okay? So now any data type that you set up, you can then connect other tables between each other through that field. All right? So now there's an inherent link between the menu items table and the restaurants table. And that's important because now we can tie menu items back to a specific restaurant. So if I go to app data now, go back to app data, we have our menu items table now. And let's add a new entry. All right, now we notice something a little bit different about this restaurant column that we set up. All right, so if I try to type something in here, Peter's Pizza, nothing comes up. We're going to change the search field to be not to look up to the unique ID of the restaurant, but to the name. Okay, type of restaurant's name. We're going to add Peter's Pizza. In the same way that the search box wouldn't let us put in an invalid value, now this won't let us do that either. You can't just put anything in here. It's got to be a valid value from the restaurant table. Super important, fundamental concept. Get used to this. Okay, Peter's Pizza, the name is going to be a regular slice. And we're going to make it $5. All right, now we've got one thing for our menu items. Let's add 2 for each restaurant. This is tedious, but you should be doing this along with me. Sicilian slice. Oops, put that in the wrong spot. Sicilian slice. Again, we're going to do Peter's Pizza. It's 6. Okay. Pork plate cakes. We'll make that 15. Chicken plate cakes. Make that 20. And we'll do 2 more for Frank's frozen yogurt. Vanilla. Frank's. 3. And strawberry. Frank's. 4. Okay, so now we have 2 menu items per restaurant. Now let's go back to our front end and see how we can present these items based on the restaurant that the user has put into that search box that we created. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm going to program my repeating group over here. This is my repeating group menu items. The type of content we want is going to be menu items. We want menu items to display here. And then we know that if you've watched my other videos, you know that in order to retrieve data from the database, you have to do a search for. And in this case, we're looking for menu items. Okay, let's leave it at that for now. Let's see what we get. Well, actually, let me program some of these text elements too. All right, so text food items name. This is going to be current sales menu items name. And then we'll do current sales menu items cost just below that. All right, cool. So now we have all of them. We have every one of those showing here in this repeating group. That's what we told it to do. That's what we wanted. Now let's fix this up a little bit. First off, let's format these numbers so they look like numbers. All right, so if I add to this expression, format it as currency, dollars, I'm in the US, and 2 decimal places. We'll do that, and what we'll also do is add a constraint, right? So we want to tie this repeating group to the value that's in this search box here, what the user enters here. So we're going to do what's called a constraint. We're going back to our data source here. This is in the repeating group, data source. Add a new constraint. Restaurant, so we're referring to the restaurant column in our menu items table here, is equal to search box restaurants value. Okay, now this is called search box restaurants. Very important to name your elements properly so that you know what to call them, how to reference these things throughout your app, whether in the front end, workflows, or back end. You always want to name your elements properly. All right, so let's see if that works. We've got nothing so far. That's good because there's nothing in this group. There's nothing in the search box yet. Now if I type in pizza, oh cool, I got Peter's Pizza. And look, we only get the ones for Peter's Pizza here. Regular slice, Sicilian slice. That's awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. So we're constraining, just to recap, we're constraining the menu items that are displayed in this repeating group based on the value that the user has put in to this search box. Okay, what's next? Next, let's create an order. Let's create a way for a user to create an order. All right, so this we're going to do a little bit differently. We're not going to manually enter this stuff. We want the user to click on this to be able to add this to their cart, add this menu item to their cart. Okay, so let's do this. Let's program this icon. We're going to do start edit workflow. So we're going to do start edit workflow, and that creates an event for us. And we're going to do data, create a new thing. Now, the things that we've created so far are menu items and restaurants. We haven't created the order table yet. So let's do that the same way that we did in the data tab, but this time we're going to be doing it from the workflow. So we're going to create a new type. New type we're going to call as an order. Cool. Now look, check this out. Back in the data tab, we have an order table. And here we have an order table. Cool. Same thing, same concept. All right, we're going to also do the same thing, create a new field. Now this should look familiar at this point. Similar here, the name. It's going to be text. The cost. Going to be a number, same concept. We could have also referred to a menu item here, but it's a little bit trickier, so we're going to keep it simple for this tutorial. And I think that's it. Now let's refer to how we set these values. So this is actually going to create a row or a thing in our orders table. Where is that information going to come from? It's coming from our repeating group. Whatever cell, and when I say cell, I mean whichever one of these things that the user is clicking into, or better yet, look at the preview. Whichever cell they click into is what's going to happen. The order is going to be based on. So we're going to say current cell's menu items name and current cell's menu items cost. And we get current cells as an option because this icon is inside the repeating group. All right, so let's try that. Well, actually, let's first set up our order repeating group so we have some visibility into what's getting created. So if I go over here, I have my repeating group cart. We're going to be looking up to an order. And again, we're going to be doing a search for orders. All right. And again, we'll just add some text here. Current sales orders name. And this will be current sales orders cost, formatted as currency, decimal places, $. Okay. So let's see what happens here. So let's do Kate. We add a pork plate and a chicken plate. Sweet. Now we have it in our cart. Awesome. All right, what do we do from here? And you'll notice that in the orders table, we also have those two values. Okay? All right, so we've done two of the four CRUD operations so far. For those of you that don't know, CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. These are the main data operators when it comes to programming. We've done two of those. We've created data via the workflow, and we've read data. That's really the do a search for thing that we've been doing to present. We're reading the database. The last two are going to be to update and delete. Let's do delete first because it's a little bit easier. So let's talk about this trash icon. Say the user adds an item that they really don't want, right? You want them to be able to delete that. So what we're going to do is click on our icon, start edit workflow, and we're going to go to data, delete thing. Thing to delete is going to be current sales order. Okay? Pretty simple. This is the easier of the three. So now you can see if I'm here, it holds that data because I'm just searching for the, it holds that data. All right, so if I want to get rid of this, boom, boom, and then it's gone, all right? Wiped out of our database completely. All right. Now, let's introduce another topic called autobinding. All autobinding means is that you don't have to hit a save button in order to change a value in the database or in one of your tables, right? All you have to do is put the new value into the input, and that automatically updates the database, the U of our CRUD operations. The placeholder here is quantity. How many does the user want, as opposed to having to keep clicking on the same item? All right, so the initial content, you're going to see something here called enable auto binding on parent elements thing. All right, the field to modify, we don't have the field that we want to modify yet. We don't have a quantity field. So let's create that. We can do that from here too. Create a field name, and again, this is going to be in the order table. Field name is going to be the quantity. And the field type is going to be a number again. All right, now we're going to get this message from Bubble saying you want to modify an input, but you haven't set up any privacy rules. So let's take a look at the privacy rules tab. All right, this is one of the 5 tabs that are important here. So if I click this, it takes us to the privacy tab, and it allows us to set up privacy rules for these data types. This is something that you're going to have to set up to protect the data from the outside world, right? You want to protect your user data, and that can be done via privacy rules. All right, so right now we're between the data types and app data that we've been working with so far. So let's define a new rule here, and we can call this autobinding quantities. And spell. Autobinding quantities. Okay, so what we can say here is very similar to the expressions that we set up on the front end. When current user is this order's creator, allow autobinding, and allow autobinding on the quantity. And then we're going to uncheck these for everybody else, right? In frozen yogurt, let's add vanilla here. The quantity we're going to put in as 2. All right, so all I did was put the number in there and kind of like move out of it. And now if we go to our app data table, and we go to our order table, we've got strawberry, and the quantity is 2. Okay, what we should probably also do when the user clicks on the icon to create a new order, this one, is set the quantity to be 1. All right, so we can say quantity, 3 times the charm, quantity equals 1. All right, because we assume that if they're clicking on this button, they want at least one of these things. Okay. All right, let's do this again. Peters, sling and slice. All right, so you see how you have 1 here. I can change this to 3, and it holds that value. Now, you'll probably say that, well, the price is wrong now because I've got 2 of these, right? This is just the cost of a single thing. All right, so let's change that. Now, this is the important part about setting the correct data types, or the correct, the correct data type. This is the important part about setting the correct data types for your column. Because this is a number, I can now say the orders cost multiplied by the current cell's orders quantity. And then I can format that back to the currency. All right, so if I preview that, look, now it's got 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 5 regular slices equals 15. Cool. All right, now let's run as 2 different users. Let's add another, I've got the current user's email as a text element up here. So let's run as somebody here. Make sure they're not getting wrong information. All right, so I'm running as jmello at payhouse.co. And let's add an order here. All right, so I've got these 2 in my cart. Now let's run as the other user, apps at payhouse. You see these do not show up. But if I run as jmello again, boom, it's back. We haven't lost that data. All right, so the privacy rules is what's preventing this information from displaying to the wrong user. Okay, you could also set constraints up in the repeating group itself. Here, this is a little less secure, but if you want to be double safe, you can say something like created by is equal to current user. So if you've got both of these in place, then you're double secure. So let's now just go back to a few important topics that I glossed over here that are very important, but we'll talk more about it. We'll talk more about them when we speak. A slug. A slug is a very useful column to be built in because what you can do with a slug is create a unique URL unique URL for a specific database thing. Okay? So if I set, and that becomes useful for like search engine optimization purposes. You don't have to create a new page for every single restaurant, for example, that you want to display. I don't have to create an individual page in Bubble. I can just create one page and have that page hold the item slug so that it only presents the information about that restaurant, and that creates a unique URL. So that's where slugs are handy. Amongst other things, that's the most common use case for slugs. Another thing, this is the second thing. When you create a new field, you'll see this field is a list multiple entries. All right, this is very misunderstood. Usually people take this to mean that there's going to be more than one thing in the database, more than one row in the database. That is always going to be the case, like 99.9% of the time. What this really means, again, going back to our Excel analogy, if you check this, that means that you want more than one value in a single cell. So an example of when this would be appropriate is like in the user table, if we were creating a favorites list of restaurants, right? The user being able to save multiple restaurants to their profile as favorites, right? So we check that off, hit create. And now if we go back here to our user table, we have our favorites. We can say, all right, one of my favorites is Peters. Add, and then we're going to do Frank's also. Add, and then save. All right, now you can see that I've got a list of information in this one cell. That's the appropriate use case for a list, all right? Be careful with this. Hiding and displaying fields are easy via this pencil, right? If you want fields, just uncheck these and save, and then you'll get the view to just view certain relevant columns. Note that that is important. Also, another thing to note that's important is that there are two separate databases in your Bubble app at all times. You have the development environment, you have the development database and the live database. These do not speak to each other. Okay, they're totally separate. So there's advanced features in which you can copy and restore data from one, or copy data from the development database to the live database, but that's pretty advanced. I wouldn't go into that just yet. You can also upload data, modify data, and export, and do kind of these bulk operations on your data. Again, more advanced stuff. All right, let's get into the last two things here. Let's just talk briefly about the last two here. Option sets. A common example of an option set. You want to use option sets when the options are not going to change that often, right? They're not based on any like user input. It's just like static options. So like days of the week is a good example here. Days of week. This could be one option set, right? So you would create, right? So the options under this one would be Monday, Tuesday. Right, these are this is like the things in your database, almost the rows of your table here, if we're comparing this back to an actual data type. And then an attribute will be like the column, right? So this should look familiar at this point. We can call this day number. That would be a number. You can modify the attributes. Day number for Monday would be 1. Day number for Tuesday would be 2. Okay. So option sets are a little bit quicker to work with when presenting static options to the user, right? They're kind of this midway point between data and front-end options. All right, and then lastly, I mean, not too much to say here about the file manager. Everything that gets uploaded to your app, either by you or your users, is going to get stored in this file manager here. So you can always kind of look up different files, the different files history that have been uploaded to your app, right? That's really it. I hope that's helpful. Recreate this, recreate these options as I've done them before we meet. This way that when we do meet, we can kind of debug anything that went wrong or concepts that I may have gone over too fast and elaborate on those a little bit. Okay, so try and recreate this. Again, I'm going to put a link to this editor in the description of this video, as well as the 2 other videos that I referenced. Those will all be in the description. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.